Now we're getting into cost. I mentioned this earlier, and I'll just reiterate it. And so cost is obviously important. It's top of mind. It is the barrier to entry in many respects, one of the major ones. I encourage you to look at what the return is, because the case that you make for yourself, your business partner, your investors, your lender, their underwriters, really is not going to be what the total cost is. They're going to want to know it. It's important. Is it 4 million or 12 million? Yes, you got to know that. But what is the return? What is the opportunity that this business venture offers? And so what's the return for me becomes, effectively is more important, because you going out and raising $1 million versus $1.2 million. I would say if you can go raise $1 million, anybody else that you're talking to, it sees that you have, an operating agreement and a subscription letter for this business venture, and you've raised $1 million. The final 200,000, I won't say is going to be easy, but it's the initial raise that the initial investment that's going to be the biggest challenge. So what's the return becomes, in my mind, more important than the total cost. I'm not saying ignore cost. I'm not saying we'll just build a $12 million version. No, that's not what I'm saying. Because you do need to tie it to your demographic, and it needs to make sense, needs to be built to scale, to fit. I'm going to lean more on the side of being more lean, meaning less square footage, less total cost, for a number of reasons, which we would get into the strategy behind that within the online range conference and why. But it helps put you on more sure footing with your the folks you're talking to. Okay, so we left off, I think, with the Wisconsin rifle range question. Is a range profitable in Alaska? Look, I want to say yes. I've never been there. Would love to go. Would love to visit. Would love to stay for a long visit, I'm sure. But profitable indoor range in Alaska. What city are you in? What community? Are there any indoor ranges there already? And who are you serving? So if you're in a Alaska destination that has, air service, and hunters are coming to go on their guided hunts and so forth, kind of tourist sort of destination, my goodness. It seems to make some sense that those folks need to be able to sight their rifles in when they hit the ground after they've flown. Maybe that works differently. I'm not a big game hunter, never spent time in Alaska, obviously, but man, I just have more questions, I think, than answers. My expectation is you got a lot of access to public land, just like you do in Western states, and, Nevada, Arizona, where there's BLM land and you can just go out in the desert and shoot. But are you serving the local community who doesn't maybe have access or does not want to be subject to the elements, the weather? So a lot of opportunity to talk about. Again, my assumption would be that yes, it'll be profitable, but a lot of that's also going to depend upon whether or not you overbuild. You could build a 30-lane range in a market that doesn't support it. So it's an answer that I answer with. It's a question that I answer with more questions, I think, Donna. Great one. I think whether it's Alaska or Albuquerque or where it just is going to depend. But we'll get into the mechanics from a demographic perspective of why in the online range conference, if you feel like that's a suitable option for you, and really answer that question for you definitively as the metrics and knowledge are and insights are rolled out. Okay, next question from William. Pricing, best way to start when you already have a business plan. Great. The online range conference will not write your business plan for you. The online range conference is all about the business model. The business model is then used for you to write your narrative. Narrative is, a 30-page document that, from my perspective, serves as a guide. It will be the majority of the questions will be answered within the confines of the business model, budget, pro forma, documentation. That should drive the narrative, the story, because the story is it's telling and conveying the vision. So, best way to start, if your business plan includes your detailed budget, so your cost to establish with your at least estimate of real estate costs, all your design and soft costs, your hard costs, and then your equipment costs, everything that's startup related. That's a 30, 40, 60 line item budget. And then you also have all of your revenue mapped out on a per category of revenue item for the cost of that item, average cost, the margin, your cost of goods if you're buying handguns, your cost of handguns, long guns, ammo, etc. What's the average cost for you? And then what's the retail price? And what's your net at the end? That needs to be mapped out on a monthly basis for at least 3 years. Let's see how, as the business is established, how those numbers grow, because they're going to be growing as you gain market presence and gain popularity. And then how all that feeds into the pro forma for your investors. Do you have to raise money, William? That's an important question in terms of where to start. I would not start by going out and finding real estate. If you have your business plan done, do you now have at least a representative example, call it a stick figure, if you will, a simple drawing of your floor plan? You don't want to go spend a ton of architectural money nailing down that floor plan, because 9 times out of 10, the real estate that you end up with is not going to accommodate that exact footprint, and then you'd be starting over. So from a design perspective, there's 3 phases: schematic, design development, and then construction documents. And until you have property that you control, that you have zoning approval for, you don't want to go past schematics. And I mean schematics with an architect. Gosh, if you spend, depending on the size of your range, you spend $8,000 to $20,000, depending on a couple of factors. Until you have property and zoning and have a really good sense of where your investors are coming in on the deal, I wouldn't go far into any kind of design contract with an architectural team or civil engineering. So, okay, cost and scalability. We've talked about cost in prior, so I won't touch on that. Scalability, yeah, the range business consistently for me has resulted in subsequent locations for range owners. Range at Lake Norman, range at Valentine, the Frontier Justice, Saddle River Range, Mission Ridge Range and Academy. Only Independence Indoor, I guess, comes to mind. Republic Gun Club, they have not expanded into a second location. I don't think they really want to. But more than half have gone on to now own and operate with multiple locations. I've helped them with multiple locations, all of them that I mentioned. So scalability is there. The opportunity is there because you've built this marketing machine, you have this HR machine, you have the buying power with an existing FFL business with distributors over the course of several years, typically. Maybe you're to the point where you're going to be able to graduate into apply for membership in a buy group, which really helps your margins. So yes, scalability. Yes, it absolutely is possible. I try to temper or balance the mindset of folks who call and say, hey, I'm going to be the franchise that doesn't exist. There are some franchise models, one franchise model out there, and it's got its challenges that I haven't really been able to get a definitive answer or clear answer to how it works, if it's going to work well in the long run. But okay, Jake, finding investors. Two things. Do you have the knowledge and the documentation and the reputation behind that documentation that has a proven set of systems and checklists and guidance and metrics for those investor conversations to check the items off on their list that they need to say yes, that they want to take advantage of the opportunity to invest with you. That's important. Then actually finding investors, 9 times out of 10, this is going to be local, not through, some LinkedIn post you make or a VC companies, out of Boston or somewhere, it's just not, or Dallas. Those are not likely candidates. It's typically going to be from within your network of people that you know or people that they know. You cannot, according to SEC regulations, put a billboard up or a website for that matter and say, hey, I'm raising money, without going through some major hoops and spending tens of thousands on legal documentation. It's just some disclosure requirements that keep you from doing that. So it's and this is not tax equity financial advice. It's just what I've seen and witnessed. I'm conveying to you is that the network that you've got is where that money is typically going to come from. Arming yourself with the right equipment, and then arming yourself with the right mindset, I guess, is the third thing I would say when it comes to the equity investors. And that is, as I mentioned earlier, and I won't rehash, but it is an opportunity for them. It is not you asking for money. If y'all want to hear more about that, we can talk about it, but it's important to make that distinction. It feels like, I get it, it feels like you're asking, but it's really an opportunity. You really should look at this as you're evaluating them as a long-term partner, because you don't want an investor on board who's constantly coming in, making quote unquote suggestions and trying to throw their weight around. You need an operating agreement that speaks to the needs that you have as an operator and the latitude and the runway to get to your objectives without having this constant noise and sound and second guessing coming at you. You might have investors who do serve as a mentor or business partner, and that's great, but framing that relationship, cultivating that relationship, and knowing where each of you stand, what the relationship's going to be like before there's money in play and before you're pursuing real estate and zoning and design and bids and so forth, is important to set that groundwork. So a lot of discussion around investors and finding investors that can be had. But they're literally, I don't know if, when I was in high school, the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, if you could play with your friends. Well, I know so-and-so who knows so-and-so, knows so-and-so, and you can end up like you're only 7 relationships away from Kevin Bacon. All of us are. Almost literally. So they're out there. There is money out there. There's piles of money out there. It's a matter of finding the right people and connecting with them and networking with them and not being subject to the other things that need to get done in a way that puts so much pressure on you in those investor conversations. Yeah. If you don't, here's the other part of this. If you have enough money to initially invest, go through the online range conference, get this foundational amount of work done, and that's it. Number one, I don't want you to be like all in and you got to make it work based on the online range conference. And if it doesn't work, you're broke. That's not who this course is for. But what it does is it positions you to then speak from a very well-informed perspective, an unbiased perspective. Like, you might be talking to equipment manufacturers about how many millions of rounds are going to go into your trap. Okay, but that's not what the online range conference is about. We're really focused on driving towards what's known and proven, and then bringing that range equipment into the equation when it's appropriate, which is really not on the front end. Because I won't say it doesn't matter, but if you haven't heard my wheels and tires analogy, look that video up, because range equipment is needed to make this gun range roll down the road. But it is just wheels and tires in this process of getting it built. So, yeah, lots to talk about on the investor front. I don't want to turn this into a ramble. Financing and lending, generally have not had a problem on this, Gregory. I did have a deal last year, excuse me, in California. One of the partners, very wealthy, and they didn't have an equity raise between the two partners. They contributed all the equity. And my impression from the conversations was they had great banking relationships, wasn't going to be a problem. They bought the building, and then the wheels started to fall off on their banking relationships, which is not uncommon. The banker who you think you're going to use typically is not the one. And so this is also a mindset shift for a lot of people, is I know the bank that I want to use, and they funded gun ranges before. And typically that bank that you think is going to be the one is not the one that's going to work out. It's an opportunity for them and any bank, and I want to help position you so that it is a competitive situation within the implementation phase of the process after the online range conference. But going to the bank and asking, just like going to an investor and asking, is the wrong mindset from my perspective. The financing is certainly more expensive. So why build ranges when cost of construction is up, or why interest rates are up? Well, so is the cost of membership. I mean, the range memberships that we programmed 4 years ago, I just was talking to one of the range operators, Terry. His base membership is now $55. Well, a couple of years ago, we were programming range memberships at $29. Well, so as the tides rise in the harbor, all boats go up. And so whether it's inflation, whether it's the interest rate, cost of guns, cost of ammo, et cetera, is all going up. So yeah, the opportunity to construct a range today, it's never going to get cheaper. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in commercial real estate since 2001. And I can look back at pro formas and budgets for construction for grocery anchored shopping centers and freestanding retail. And we were at one point, we were at like $125, $140, $150 per foot. And I mean, the early days would be at like $70 or $80 a foot. Now that we're nowhere close. So it's not going to go back down is the point. And so your appraised value in a few years after operation, well, can you refinance after the appraised value has increased? It's been done multiple times on ranges that we've established in multiple markets around the country. So financing and lending, I will just maybe finish with this, Gregory. The equity will be typically, for most people, more of a challenge than finding a suitable lender. I want to position you in the implementation phase with multiple lender opportunities, and it'll come through an introduction that I can provide to folks that reach that point in this process. Okay. Strongly considering building a new shop with a range. My concern is the range being profitable, not failing, keeping the doors open. Chris. Yeah. Well, let's sort that out up front on paper. While it's cheap, relatively speaking, there's some to get your budget detailed, built out, tied to your demographic. That's what the online range conference, that's what it's programmed for, intentionally, to answer all those questions definitively. Will you fail? It kind of reads like a new shop with a range? Are you already an FFL? I'm not sure. I think maybe you are. Yeah, it looks like you are. Okay. So as an existing FFL, you have an advantage because of all of the ATF and compliance related issues. You already know what it takes to actually sell a gun. You acquire them from distributors and then you sell them. That process and knowing it gives you a great advantage on the retail side. There's one thing I have not touched on in these Q&As. This business is less about the range. The range is kind of the milk and eggs in the back of the grocery store. Like they're there, you set them, they're not broken, they're not stale, you're good. They're great. That's actually really expensive to build, but the machine, the issue, the heartbeat that you've got to capitalize upon and master and tame on a daily basis is the retail. The retail component of a typical shooting range has a human cost, has a buy process. You're making ultimately, as you get further into this owner operating venture, your ability to buy improves, and that helps improve your margin over time. So, yeah, the retail piece of this we've not talked about, but that's really where the challenges come. So as an existing FFL, you have a leg up. Building a range now for a gentleman in Georgia. He's been a long time FFL, tired of telling people he doesn't have a place for them to shoot and watching their money walk out the door with them because he's not able to charge them for training and memberships. And now he's building a range to solve for that problem. So if you're a long-time FFL, you got an advantage in that regard. If you're not an FFL and you're listening to this, but you have a business mindset or you have a marketing background, you're a trainer, but you got a great personality, or I should say, and you have a great personality. Those are kind of key elements. If you want to build a range because you love guns and you like it's an extension of your hobby, it might not be the best venture just because this is not, the first couple of years are intense. You're building a marketing machine that needs to be fed and filtered and supported and strategized over. So yeah, again, lots to talk about there. The cost of a 5-lane range from Phil, 25 yard, 5-lane range. 5 lanes is on the bottom end of the kind of what makes sense to build. If you said, I want to build a 3-lane range, I would say on a per lane basis, you're going to be way out of whack. So if we talk to any of the range HVAC manufacturers, I think they're going to tell you 6 would be kind of the floor for what would make sense. And this is really driven by the fact that the range HVAC units are not scalable on a per lane basis. So the optimum is kind of, based on my recollection, is 8 lanes. They can potentially stretch the bigger units to go up to 12 lanes on one unit. And then you have to have another unit. And whether or not you have 2 bays and 2 units, air units is a strategy to sort through from a number of reasons, perspectives. But 5 lanes, generally, if it's a new build, just the range equipment is going to be $80,000 to $100,000 per lane, plus the cost of the building, plus the cost of all your soft costs, startup. So it's just a isolated item on the budget that needs more context. You can get a quote from Range Systems, Action Target, Rushing Ranges, Inveris, Spire, all those guys. I would say you're probably not going to be taken too seriously if you're just saying, I want a quote for a 5-lane range. My question is, what's going with that? What's supporting it? Is it retail? event space, gunsmithing? What are the things that are going to make that range work? Is it just the range? Is it just range services that you're driven towards? That's a business model that's becoming, I think, more prevalent and of more interest to folks. Okay, zoning. Maybe we can get through this. 5 minutes to keep it under 30. Okay, so zoning and project pricing. I think I've mostly covered this, Samantha. Given zoning strategy earlier, at least kind of started to dive into that. And then project pricing is going to include the things I've mentioned earlier: real estate, soft costs, hard costs, equipment, and then all of your FF&E and working capital. Okay, so I won't belabor that, but if you have a specific question you want me to get into, I will revisit it. How do I know if my area is good for the indoor range? Couple of things. I think you know whether or not it's good. And what I mean by that is there a range in your market that's doing well, serving the customers well? Is it busy or not? I mean, that's just kind of just real life data you can observe and take account of. If not, great question, because it's like, well, hey, if there's not one here, how do we know? We drive towards those answers with the demographic reporting that we do. Not only the National Shooting Sports Foundation, they have a demographic report, which we run on every single project we do. It's included in this process with the Online Range Conference, which I'll talk more about if you're interested, within another set of videos that are the pre-registration videos for the Online Range Conference. But the demographic report is what really drives knowing whether or not it's good in your area. What part of the country you're in is going to have a bearing on it, on its success, and then just total project cost. When you say good, what does that mean? Because I think a gun range ought to be in every community, every micropolitan. Look up Forreston, Illinois. There's a 12-lane range in Forreston, Illinois that a gentleman owns and operates and has for several years now. And it's the middle of nowhere. So yeah, ranges can work in metro areas and in suburban areas, micropolitans, and even rural areas. So it depends. How can I go about penetrating a market that may not be keen on having a shooting range? The second part of Chris's question. Why are they not keen on it? Like politically, you mean? And penetrating the market, meaning attract enough customers, or are you talking about getting the range established? I don't want to talk to you more about that, what you mean. How can I get keen on? I mean, here's the overarching idea to a range, to a zoning conversation, to within your business model narrative is my hope is that for everybody, the undercurrent and the messaging that's out there is training, education, skill development. Those are kind of these intangibles. Training's not, but the narrative of them: training, skill development, education, knowledge. Imparting those things are not a SKU, not a product that somebody walks out the door with, but they're really important, I think, for the community to hear, and as your messaging and as a part of your brand. And firearms, not to get into the politics of it, but the politics that are around them, and ranges and FFLs and gun dealers and all of that, needs more quality indoor ranges. Indoor because they're in proximity to the population and they're accessible because most of them are open to the public, whereas the vast majority of outdoor ranges are not open membership. They're by invite only, for example. and you can't pay to play generally. So indoor ranges, I think, a lot of what's been driving me, at least from a idea perspective, is more quality, well-run indoor ranges by responsible owner operators is just better for the American um, economy, culture, just what we need more of. We could talk a lot about that and all the politics, but I will digress for now. Range safety. Yeah, Richard, of course. I just literally talked about knowledge and training and so forth. Range safety as a concern. There are ranges that range operators set up and will not have an RSO. I would say those are not as successful ranges. So the expense of an RO on staff when you're operating, I don't mean standing against the back wall, watching and policing and ready to crack down, but guide, coach, concierge, help. Somebody's got a personality whose mindset is, I know what the RO, range safety officer, minimum requirements are to keep people safe and shooting, and for them to then also, give a pro tip or some guidance, or if they need another box of ammo and they need to vacate their position for their range for a minute, walk away and leave their range bag, and the RO is there to kind of not take responsibility, but facilitate the experience is important. Safety could also mean, just from a ballistic equipment perspective, that's how the range is run is going to be more an issue from a safety perspective than the equipment, because all the angles and steel thicknesses and so forth are going to accommodate safety in that regard. So maybe you mean something else, Richard, but that's my answer for now. And then final question for now is cost associated with starting a range. DeMario, yeah, depends on the size of the range, depends on your market, because real estate costs will vary significantly. But shameless plug, the online range conference is structured around mapping out your square footage, tying that to your demographic, and then building that cost to establish budget, CTE is what I call it, for all the inputs to establish the range. I want to drive towards then what's going to make that range, that size of range, profitable. So yeah, hope that's helpful. All right, fun answering the questions, Q&A session. I've got a bunch of FAQs. I'm going to post some more videos on just general FAQs. I actually did a AI, how to build a gun range FAQ that might be of help. So keep an eye out for that. And also the online range conference and the on-ramp process for taking applications. There's going to be a series of questions that need to be answered for those who are interested in it. You do need to pre-qualify effectively, but that's coming shortly before we the invitation for buying your seat will come after those applications have been received. So stay tuned for that.